Good afternoon. I'm Delegate Stephanie Smith. I can leave my own name out. We're here for the Education Economic Development hearing for today, bringing it to order. We'll be beginning with MSDE headquarters, their budget, and first we'll hear from our budget analyst, Laura Hyde.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Starting on page 1 with the operating budget summary, the fiscal 26 budget for MSD headquarters increases by $14.9 million or 4% to $388.1 million. The general fund allowance decreases by $5 million compared to the fiscal 25 working appropriation. And this is offset by increases of $8.7 million in special funds and $11.7 million in federal funds. Turning to page 5, Exhibit 1. This exhibit shows retention of teachers of color as part of MSD's Managing for Results measures. And this is one of the blueprint measures also approved by AIB, the State Board of Education, and has a retention goal of 75%. The graph shows that from school year 2023 to 2024, Maryland retentions of teachers of color decreased slightly, but MSD projects retention to improve across all groups in fiscal 25 and 26, with the state potentially on track to meet AIB's 75% retention goal for Asian and Hispanic Latino teachers by the school year 25-26. The bold language indicates that MSD should comment on this MFR. Turning to page 7, Exhibit 2, the Division of Rehabilitation Services. In fiscal 2024, the measure of students with individuals with disabilities that achieve an employment outcome totaled 1,009, which is an increase of 15 individuals from 2023 to 2024. And then the total of individuals with disabilities who receive pre-employment transition services totaled 8,700, which is an increase of approximately 1,600 individuals. This exceeds the goal by approximately 1,700 individuals. The bold language at the bottom of page 7 indicates that MSDE should comment on the efforts to assist 1,300 plus individuals with disabilities to obtain competitive integrated employment in fiscal 2025. Turning to page 7, this is a exhibit, I did that already. Turn to page 11, exhibit 3. This is the overview of agency spending. So the division with the largest allowance is DOORS, which receives $165.9 million. The Office of the State Superintendent receives $67.9 million. The Deputy for Teaching and Learning receives $47.1 million, and the Deputy for Organizational Effectiveness receives $44.9 million, with other divisions receiving the remainder of the funding. Turning to page 13, Exhibit 4. This is the proposed budget, and this shows where the changes are in the budget. So the division with the notable change involves the addition of $8.3 million in Blueprint special funds to the MSD headquarters budget for new programs and expenses. Funds allocated for Blueprint Training for Leaders, which is a mandated program in Chapter 36 as amended, receives $3 million in fiscal 25. And in the fiscal 26 budget as introduced, the $3 million in Blueprint funds for Blueprint Training for Leaders is replaced with an allowance of $6.3 million also in Blueprint funds for the Maryland School Leadership Academy, which is part of the Governor's Blueprint initiatives under SB 429, HB 504, the Excellence in Maryland Public Schools Act. But Blueprint funds in this budget are also used to cover an increase of $2 million for MSD teacher recruitment activities and $3 million for administrative costs for the Concentration of Poverty program. Because the Blueprint Training for Leaders started in January 2025, DLS recommends reducing the fiscal 26 allowance by $3.2 million in Blueprint special funds to level fund the Maryland School Leadership Academy at $3 million. There's also additional bold language asking MSD to account for these changes. So turning to page 16, this is personnel. So from fiscal 25 to 26, MSD headquarters gained a total of 37 positions and 1 contractual full-time position. There are new positions in multiple departments, and there's 1 position for Maryland Center for School Safety for their fiscal and grant units. The bold language on that page says to comment on agency efforts to reduce vacancy rates, and also makes a recommendation considering the high number of long-term vacant positions to reduce 5 positions from that budget. Turning to page 18, This is Exhibit 5. This shows the State Education Agency Fund distributions. So these are funds that were distributed as part of State Education Agency federal stimulus funding. And of this amount, MSD has designated $173.9 million for Maryland Leads, which is a set of 7 programs designed to address student learning loss, $59.9 million for other learning loss, $51.1 for discretionary programs, $14.7 for state emergency needs, and $3.5 million for administration. Turning to page 20, this is Exhibit 6. This shows that in fiscal 2024, Maryland Leads expenditures totaled $158.6 million, which is about 91% of the allocation. This is also shown on page 21 in Exhibit 7. This is the Maryland Leads expenditures by LEAs, and you can see the same amount has been expended. Turning to page 23, this is Exhibit 8. This shows the SEA discretionary funding that as of January 2024, out of the $303.1 million allocated to these programs, approximately 90.5% has been expended. The bold language shows that MSD should comment on these expenditures and the outcome measures, SEA funding discrepancies as well. DLS recommends committee narrative to continue to report on these funding expenditures. Turning to page 25, Exhibit 9. This is the proposed timeline for literacy policy implementation. So this shows that about the new literacy policy that MSD is working on, the science of reading and its components. MSD's draft literacy policy is the most recent step by the department to implement Chapter 512 of 2019, which MSD calls the Ready to Read Act. Chapter 512 called for the adoption of evidence-based literacy instruction, screening to identify at-risk students for reading difficulties, and supplemental instructional services to help students achieve reading proficiency by grade 3. In October 2024, MSD introduced the most recent version of the draft literacy policy to the State Board of Education, and once that draft is approved, MSD plans to implement the components by school year 2027-2028. The bold language says that MSD should comment on the status of the new literacy policy, expenditures for this program, and plans to expend federal and nonprofit grants associated with it. It also suggests committee narrative for a report on this policy implementation and progress towards state reading goals. Turning to page 27, Exhibit 10. This is for school safety grant funding under the Maryland Center for School Safety. It shows that $66.8 million has been allocated in the MCSS budget for school safety programs and evaluations between fiscal 2024 and 2026. $26 million of this is general funds and $40.8 million is special funds. This amount does not include $10 million for the school safety grant program, which is allocated in the budget of the Interagency Commission for School Construction. Turning to page 28, Exhibit 11. This shows the Safe Schools Fund balance. You can see that a lot of these programs are funded out of the Safe Schools Fund. And due to a $19.1 million balance at the closeout in fiscal 2022 and underspending on SRO grants in fiscal 23 and 24, the estimated Safe Schools Fund balance at the end of fiscal 25 totals $18.8 million. With a negative deficiency in fiscal 25, withdrawing $5 million and another $5 million contingent reduction in the fiscal 2026 budget for the SRO grant, the estimated fund balance at the end of fiscal 26 totals $10.8 million. This indicates that the remaining Safe Schools Fund balance could be used to replace an additional $5 million in general funds for the SRO grant and still leave a balance. And so the bold language indicates that MSCSS should comment on the reasons for underspending in the SRO grant program and also reasons for the growing SSF balance. Recommended actions for Maryland State Department of Education headquarters budget start on page 30, and there's 9 recommendations. And then there's an update section starting on page 32 that has MFR measures for MCSS and the Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. This concludes my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hyde, for your presentation. Are there any questions for her? Seeing none, we'll move on to our State Superintendent, Wright, and team. Great to see you.
Nice to see you. Thank you for having us.
Of course, and feel free to reintroduce your team as well.
Sure. So good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Carrie Wright, State Superintendent of Schools. With me today is Krishna Tulur, who is the Deputy State Superintendent for Operations and Finance, and Donna Gunning, who is the Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Finance. I want to thank you very much for your hard work and your commitment to education, and I really want to give a shout out to Ms. Laura Hyde, who's done the analysis of our budget. So thank you so much for both. But before we respond to the analysis, I'd like to share an update on how the department under my leadership is improving education for all children in the state. Since we met this time last year, the department, with guidance from the State Board of Education and in collaboration with the Accountability and Implementation Board, has been extremely busy implementing policies designed to ensure all students are able to graduate high school, college, and career ready. And here are some highlights. As I shared with you last year, the Maryland State Board of Education adopted a resolution to have Maryland among the top 10 in the nation in reading and math in the nation's report card, the National Assessment of Education Progress, by 2027. In 2013, Maryland was among the top 2 highest performing states, but by 2022, Maryland had ranked only 40th in the nation. We have seen significant investments in the science of reading and math through strategic philanthropic partnerships. Last spring, I finalized a partnership with the IBIS Group and SUNY, the State University of New York, to offer a micro-credential program in the science of reading that provides high-quality professional learning, and over 5,000 teachers and administrators have participated to date. Last spring, I also finalized a partnership with Arnold Ventures to bring math tutoring to middle schoolers and to provide professional development for teachers. These investments, along with the hard work of teachers across the state, are starting to show results. The 2024 NAEP results for 4th and 8th grade for Maryland show real progress for reading and modest progress in math. 4th grade reading scores are now 20th in the nation, up from 40th in 2022, and the work continues. In February 2024, MSDE announced the formation of a task force to examine the state's assessment and accountability systems to strengthen the connections between school ratings and student achievement. Facilitated by the National Center for the Improvement of Educational Assessment, more commonly known as the Center for Assessment, the task force guiding priorities for this work included improving outcomes for all students, measuring what is important for improving student outcomes, using accountability to drive behavior, transparency in monitoring and reporting, and achieving the blueprint for Maryland's future call for all students to be college and career ready by the end of 10th grade. The members of this task force included state and local K-12 and higher education leaders, teachers, and PTA members. The task force presented their final report with recommendations and implementation guidelines to the state board. This report was accepted on December 3rd, 2024. Some of the recommendations included adopting an appropriate student growth measure in a manner that best supports prioritized criteria, establishing common performance levels for those indicators, such as a 1 through 4 system, using a deliberative process with experts and key constituents, overhauling the assessment system, and educating the community on how to better understand our assessment and student progress. I also quickly established a technical advisory committee to provide guidance on assessment design, development, and maintenance. The TAC, which is what it's referred to as, provides objective and expert evaluation and advises us on how to develop an assessment and the key components of a strong accountability measure. MSDE's Office for Assessment is crafting an RFP for a brand new assessment system, and that we intend to award that contract in July 25. On October 2024, the State Board adopted a comprehensive pre-K through grade 3 literacy policy after a rigorous review and stakeholder feedback process. In fact, we had over 8,000 pieces of feedback on that policy before it was adopted. On January 28, 2025, MSDE shared an overview of the mathematics policy with the State Board of Ed. The goal of the policy is to give all children, including pre-K students, a chance to hone their problem-solving skills, to develop deep understanding, and to utilize their inborn ability to think mathematically. Because in reality, all kids are math kids. The policy will be submitted to the State Board Policy Committee for review and a 30-day comment period in February and March of 2025, along with comprehensive stakeholder engagement in spring and fall of 2025. MSDE, in conjunction with AIB, has been working on school leadership training. Between January 16th and 19th, we brought together over 900 school-based leaders in 5 different locations across the state. We discussed research-based instruction, staff retention, deconstructing state standards, how to use assessments, and instructional coherence, and this work will continue over the next few months. MSDE standard and framework validation committees have been hard at work. We are now conducting an overview of all of our state standards. And to give you an idea of how long ago this was that we did this, our math standards were last reviewed in 2011, literacy in 2012, arts 2016, health and PE in 2021, social studies in 2018, and science in 2013. So by the end of this spring, all of our standards will be brand new standards. The first phase of the literacy standards and framework, as well as the math standards update, will be presented to the board in May. Health ed and PE standards will be recommended to the state board in June. Social studies standards will be released for public comments in February with adoption by the board in March. And this work reflects a deep commitment on our part to equity, standards, and outcomes for all students in Maryland. I hope this helps you see how we're all committed to ensure that our students can be successful. I will now turn it over to Krishna Tuller and Donna Gunning to share the department's response to the analysis. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Wright. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, committee members. My name is Krishna Tuller, Deputy State Superintendent for Finance and Operations. I'd like to start my remarks by thanking Laura Hyde for her thoughtful and thorough analysis of department's headquarters budget, which includes both Maryland Center for School Safety and Maryland Longitudinal Data System Center. Representatives from both agencies are here today in the event you have any questions regarding their budget. I'll now share highlights of the department's response to the analysis. MSDE was asked to comment on several MFR metrics. First, for teachers of color, the department's fiscal 2026 MFR includes the AIB's recently adopted goals of for teacher retentions of all teachers and teachers of color. The department has supported LEAs through the work of the P20 Collaborative Recruitment and Retention Committee, the current leadership training program, the new School Leadership Academy, and the Maryland Educator Workforce Dashboard. Finally, all race and ethnicity groups are included in the teacher retention rate measure. Next, the efforts the DOORS is taking to reach the goal of assisting 1,371 individuals with disabilities to obtain competitive and integrated employment are detailed in the response document. The efforts include expanding the outreach, enhancing the training and employment support, as well as streamlining the intake process. The CTE dashboard is being phased out in favor of a more comprehensive and user-centered approach for data reporting. Additional details on the data reported are available in the response document. Finally, MSDE continues to collect teacher evaluation data from local education agencies. There are no new measures of teacher quality or effectiveness. Next, the analysis identified encumbrances in Division of Rehabilitation Services. These are associated with medical case services. The funds are obligated when the authorization is granted. Expenditures are recorded when the service is rendered. The DOORS staff does review encumbrance twice per year, and they are on top of that. With regards to the proposed budget changes, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to reduce the allowance by $3.2 million in blueprint special funds. These funds are necessary to support the re-envisioned approach to training for system leaders and school leaders. The Academy will focus on developing school leaders, focusing on school leaders of color, and those that serve high-poverty schools and low-performing schools. These funds are necessary to grow a pipeline of highly trained and effective school leaders. Personnel data, regarding personnel data, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendation to delete 5 pins. The department received 18 pins to support the comprehensive literacy and math initiatives, community schools, and early learning. A reduction will significantly impact the department's effort to support teachers, classroom students, schools, and school communities. Our response document also indicates the progress MSDE made in reducing the agency vacancies from about 18.7% vacancy in January of 2023 Our vacancy rates are now under 7%, and we continue to make progress in recruiting and retention. Regarding the literacy policy, Dr. Wright has provided an update on the status of literacy policy and related work. Our response submitted to the committee contains the plans for expanding both the federal and nonprofit grants. Regarding the operating budget recommending actions, for the reasons previously stated, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the request to eliminate 5 bins. MSDE concurs with the request for reports, accounting practices, science of reading, and the literacy policy, and state education stimulus funds, with the request to change the timeline for the report on Maryland leads. Finally, MSDE respectfully disagrees with the recommendations to reduce Blueprint special funds for the School Leadership Academy and the Concentration of Poverty program. The funding for Concentration of Poverty program is critical to providing the more than 700 community schools the evidence-based support and hands-on technical assistance that they have been expecting. With that, we are happy to answer your questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Well, I have a couple. So first of all, in the beginning, I saw in the analysis and, of course, addressed in your response related to the retention of teachers of color, and there's an overall goal for 75% to be the goal. But as we can see, there was a consistent lag of African-American educators compared to Asian and Latino in terms of our retention rate. I didn't really see anything in the response that would have suggested any specific strategies to the retention of Black educators, which we know that's the largest demographic in our public schools, non-white, demographic. So I didn't know if you could speak with more specificity about those efforts.
One of the things that we're noticing in our data, we have over 6,000 conditionally certified teachers, and the majority of those teachers are teachers of color. And so we know that they're going to need additional help in order to become certified teachers. So we're in the process of designing some professional learning. We're also we've had some meetings with higher ed to work out a program that we can use higher ed in our areas of higher concentrated areas of conditionally certified teachers in order to bring the service to the teachers rather than having the teachers having to go to higher ed. And so we are in deep conversation actually about implementing these strategies and trying to get this in play for the upcoming school year.
Thank you for that. And I also know that there was a discussion between the recommendations and your response related to the recommended reduction of funds for headquarters support for community schools. I think there were 2 pens you were trying to develop.
Yeah, we've got over, I think the number right now is it's sitting at 715, and that's over 50% of all schools in the state of Maryland are now identified as community schools. Right now, I have a sum total of 2 people to support 715 schools. And so some of those positions that we've asked for are for that department in order to better serve the schools across the state with a focus on those of high poverty and those that are lowest performing.
As people are probably sick of hearing me say, my children go to a community school in East Baltimore, but I wanted to know the interplay between the Towson University Center for Community Schools and headquarters currently and how they supplement your current staffing levels.
I would need to get back to you on that, Madam Chair.
Okay, no problem. Any other questions? Seeing none, that's the end of this particular panel. I do believe that Mr. Ross Goldstein is here. Is he to deliver testimony on behalf of MLDS? Oh, there you are. Okay, I didn't see you. Oh, you signed up for both, so I just wanted to make sure I didn't skip you. And is Jamisa Ford Williams here? Oh, there you are. Welcome.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, good afternoon. Did I say your name correctly?
My name is Jamisa.
Jamisa, I apologize. Thank you.
No problem. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and distinguished members of the Budget Committee. My name is Jamisa Fawcett-Williams, and I proudly serve both as a representative of Maryland State Department of Education. I'm a Doris counselor, and I'm also the president of ASME Local 3644. I would like to express my gratitude for the opportunity to testify today in support of the governor's proposed budget and his steadfast commitment to rebuilding and strengthening Maryland's state government. Our union and its members deeply appreciate the governor's ongoing efforts to improve the efficiency and effectiveness of state operations, particularly in addressing staffing shortages that have long hindered the delivery of essential services to Maryland students and individuals with disabilities. We've witnessed notable progress in filling vacancies within our agency, and we are encouraged by this positive direction. These staffing challenges have a profound effect on our ability to serve the most vulnerable residents in the state of Maryland. And the governor's proposed budget marks a critical first step in addressing these issues. However, much work remains to be done, particularly in departments which serves disability determination services, Division of Rehab Services, and child care licensing, where staffing needs continue to pose a significant challenge. Once again, thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Williams, for your testimony and for the work that you do with DOORS. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you.
Any questions for her today? Seeing none, thank you so much for your testimony. And that will conclude the budget hearing for MSDE headquarters. Now moving on to the Accountability and Implementation Board, or AIB, we will once again hear from Laura Hyde.
Again, we are starting on page 1. This is the Accountability and Implementation Board. The operating budget summary indicates that AIB's fiscal 2026 budget decreases by approximately $900,000, or 21%, to $3.4 million. AIB is funded with special funds from the Blueprint for Maryland's Future Fund, which was created as part of Chapter 36. Turning to page 3, this is the overview of agency spending. So the total allowance is $3.4 million, with the majority of spending in salaries and fringe benefits, $2.8 million. Miscellaneous services receives $200,000, or 6%. And then there are other expenses for office supplies and remaining expenses for computers, consultants, routine operating expenses, and contractual personnel. Turning to page 4, this is Exhibit 2, the proposed budget, or where the changes are in the budget. So the fiscal 2026 allowance for AIB decreases, as I said, $900,000 in Blueprint special funds from the working appropriation in fiscal 25. Expenditures increase by a net of $216,000 for personnel and $100,000 for routine operating expenses. These increases are offset by decreases of $1.1 million for technical assistance grants, which ended in fiscal 2025, and $127,000 for consultants who assisted with the development of blueprint outcome measures and implementation plan review. Turning to page 5, personnel. The fiscal 2026 budget provides AIB with 16 regular positions, and as of January 2025, AIB has filled 10 regular positions shown in this chart, but this does not include a new position for a governmental director, a relations director who started in January. As of December 31st, 2024, AIB reported 5.75 more vacancies than would be needed to meet the fiscal 2026 turnover. AIB plans to hire 5 additional staff, a director of accountability, 3 policy analysts, and an administrative fiscal officer. So they expect to have a full complement of personnel headed into fiscal 2026. The bold language at the bottom of page 5 says that AIB should comment on the reasons for the high vacancy rate, which is approximately 6 positions, and also the delays in hiring the remaining positions, particularly an accountability director. Turning to pages 6 through 8, this is Exhibit 3. This shows AIB's required reports and actions, which include review of LEA comprehensive implementation plans, additional submissions for salary increases, a career ladder and career counseling, minimum school funding issues, the AIB comprehensive implementation plan, state agency comprehensive implementation plans, the AIB's annual report. And so I just want to touch on some of the highlights of what AIB does during the year, starting at the bottom of page 8. Under Chapter 36, as amended, LEAs must ensure minimum school funding, which means that at least 75% of the per pupil amount allocated to certain programs is distributed to schools where these students are enrolled. In May 2024, AIB and MSDE issued a joint policy statement regarding the minimum school funding provision and its implementation. LEAs were urged to meet the requirement no later than the school year 2026-2027, and the timeline below indicates that in the 2024-2025 school year, fiscal 25, LEAs were expected to make a good faith effort to meet the requirement. As of January 2025, 23 of 24 LEAs have met the criteria for fiscal 25, and their funds have been released. Also on page 9, AIB is working on approval of state agency comprehensive implementation plans. They've been working on a revision of teacher preparation requirements, and they had a new work group to implement some of the work on and develop some of those measures. Turning to page 10, targeted training on Blueprint. Chapter 36 is amended, requires MSD and AIB to establish a cohort-based school leadership training program for all school, LEA, local and state board, and agency personnel in leadership positions, and this is supposed to cover strategic principles underlying Blueprint. In 2024, the grant was awarded, and AIB worked with the vendor to develop the program, which started in 2025. I think as I noted in the MSD HQ headquarters analysis, there's also money in the budget under the Excellence in Maryland Public Schools Act for similar training with a different name, the Maryland School Leadership Academy. And in the 2026 budget is introduced, those funds were provided through MSD headquarters. And as I mentioned, because of the ongoing Training for Leaders program, DLS recommended cutting back that funding by $3 million. At the bottom of page 10, AIB is still working on the independent evaluation of Blueprint implementation and reports that that is under contract. They're still overseeing the LEA technical assistance grants. That's at the top of page 11. And then they also monitor additional LEA deliverables, which include career ladder implementation plans and career counseling. The bold print at the bottom of page 12 asks AIB to comment on the reasons for the delays in the submission of the agency's annual report, which has actually been remedied. They have submitted that. The status of the teacher preparation work group, LEA technical assistance grants, career counseling MOUs, the status of the state agency implementation plans, and then any anticipated changes to Blueprint leader training or funding if HB 504 SB 429 is enacted. Looking at the bottom of page 12 and then turning to page 13, this is Exhibit 4, Blueprint outcome measures. So these outcome measures were developed underneath as part of a Blueprint outcome measures work group, and part of the work of Blueprint implementation for AIB is to develop these measures. So at the top of Exhibit 4, you can see these were measures adopted with targets for the 25-26 school year: literacy in grade 3, grades 3 through 8, mathematics, chronic absenteeism. Then there's measures adopted at the bottom of page 13 with targets in the 2026-2027 school year, including workforce diversity, teachers of color, workforce retention. And then there's measures in progress: early childhood education, college and career readiness, career ladder, and then student support personnel. So turning to page, there's at the top of page 15, there's bold language asking AIB to comment on outcome measures in progress and a timetable for finalizing all those data and goals. Then turning to page 15, this is Exhibit 5. This is one of AIB's performance measures under MFR Goal 1, which is to monitor LEA progress towards Blueprint goals. In fiscal 2024, which is the first year of these data, 79% of LEAs enrolled in pre-kindergarten and apprenticeships available to high school students achieved that goal. 75% of LEAs increased the number of students with access to school-based health centers. 46% of LEAs increased the number of NBC teachers, and 10% of schools were visited by expert review teams. Of the 5 reported measures here, 4 met or surpassed the target in fiscal 2024. Turning to page 16, Exhibit 6, this is another MFR goal on AIB Blueprint implementation support, which shows AIB's performance measures regarding technical assistance sessions, public outreach sessions, and state agency and government technical assistance sessions. The bold language at the bottom of page 16, DLS recommends that AIB discuss the reasons for setting LEA goals at 75% rather than 100% in the first measure, and then for measures of LEAs increasing the numbers of MBC teachers, students enrolled in pre-kindergarten and apprenticeships, and the students with access to school-based health centers. AIB has, on page 17, one recommended action for a report on blueprint implementation. This concludes my presentation, and I stand for questions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hyde, for your analysis. Are there any questions for her today? Seeing none, thank you. We will be welcoming Rachel Heiss, Executive Director, and Chair Leggett of the AIB, and any other team member that you need to bring with you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, and I want to also thank Ms. Hyde for her ongoing work and analysis of a very challenging and difficult set of recommendations that she's made before us. Let me start by acknowledging and thanking MSDE and Dr. Wright for an outstanding array of work and accomplishments in a relatively short period of time. We have made, in my opinion, under her leadership, considerable progress. The relationship, I think, is solid, and I think that we are in a position that better days are yet to come. We are making progress, and that is to be noted based upon testimony you've heard from her, and a couple of things that I want to reemphasize. We've seen progress not only in the inputs, but such the increase in the number of 3- and 4-year-olds enrolled in full pre-K, the number of teachers becoming national board certified, the high school number of students taking dual enrollment, but we also see the impact of the improved student outcomes. And you heard where we are, but we're not ready to spike the football at this point in time. Our objective and goal is to place us within the top 10%, and we still have a ways to go, but we are, in fact, moving in the right direction. I want to take just a little bit of time to talk about our process for changes. There's been a great deal of discussion around Annapolis in the last few weeks about changes to the blueprint and what should or should not be done. Our goal and our objective is to implement the blueprint with fidelity. If there are changes to be made, those changes need to be evidence-based. Repeat that. Our objective is to implement the blueprint with fidelity. If there are changes to be made, they need to be made based on evidence. And we have, in fact, made one recommendation for change. Let me discuss that briefly. There may be a little bit of confusion about that. And the recommendation we've made is to tie it to the challenges we are facing with the lack of teachers, the number of teachers that we need in order to implement the blueprint. The plan itself over a 10-year period calls for an increase of somewhere between 12 and 15,000 additional teachers. We start with a deficit where we are today. That does not include the retention challenges that we're having in order to keep the teachers that we already have, and the number of teachers that are conditionally certified. So if you have to increase 12 to 15,000, you have to worry about the retention challenge that we're having. And we have a considerable number, I think the number is high as 6,000, of conditionally certified teachers. That's a huge challenge. And this plan cannot be implemented as intended given those numbers. There's a great deal of discussion about all the changes that we will make in terms of improving our outreach, recruiting teachers, especially teachers of color, and all of those things that you've heard about. But I want to emphasize this point. There is no plan that I have seen, no plan whatsoever that will change these numbers overnight. We didn't get into this problem overnight, and we're not going to get out of it overnight. My original assessment was that it would take us a minimum of 2 years to get back on track with the number of teachers required. That may be as long as 4 years, and that's an optimistic number. So our suggestion, our recommendation, in fact, is to delay the implementation of the collaborative time in order to fulfill the requirements of the blueprint. But in so doing, we recognize that there may be some unintended consequences as it relates to some of the things that resources needed in order to carry it forward. And we're assessing the actual costs and need for those things that we need, in fact, to go forward, because you could do both things at one time. You could slow down the need for all of the teachers, and we will evaluate that and whether or not we will actually need that number going forward, how we can recruit additional teachers. But we also need to make certain that some of the collateral challenges we have, we are, in fact, addressing that. The AIB ultimately supports the governor's FY 226 allowance. I'm going to step back for a moment and have us go directly now to the questions that were raised and the comments that Ms. Hyde raised in her presentation, and come back with some closing comments, if you will, and respond to any questions that you may have. Ms. Hyde?
Great, thank you very much. Nice to see you all. So the first item relates to the vacancy rate and the hiring delays. So I will just say I've learned a lot moving from the legislative branch into the executive branch. And as a small agency, the AIB, it's very small. It always will be. It was designed to be a small agency. But it is very challenging to simultaneously do the work of supporting implementation of the blueprint and recruiting well-qualified staff. So we have attempted to the best of our ability to balance those priorities and bring on additional staff while at the same time making sure that we are getting the work done and the support for the LEAs and the state agencies that are implementing the blueprint. We had a priority this year for the first half of the year to fill the outreach and communications position, which we are very pleased to have someone on board, as well as the government relations director, that we again thank you, the subcommittee, and especially the vice chair for his suggestion. And we do have a government relations director on board, Ms. Joy Schaefer, who is here today. And Joy, if you want to, and some of you may remember Joy from, she was actually a member of the Kerwin Commission, representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education as a Frederick County Board of Education member, and then went on to work in Frederick County government with the county executive. So we are super pleased to have Joy on board, and she knows the blueprint. You know, most people come on board and they think they know the blueprint, but Joy knows the blueprint. So we're very pleased, and thank you again for that. We're very focused on filling the policy analyst positions. We've actually recruited for them once already and filled based on the candidates that were available, filled the positions that we could. We're going to go back and recruit again for what we weren't able to fill. The accountability director position is actually going to be filled internally, and that required a reclassification, which has now happened, and we're on track to be able to do that very soon. And then we just have the fiscal administrator position that we'll also be filling. So I'm feeling confident that we're going to be able to fill all these positions before the end of the fiscal year. Regarding, before I move on, I also want to thank you for the office space funding that you added to the budget this year. We are, fingers crossed, tentatively on the Board of Public Works agenda for the end of the month for a lease approval. We did have to go seek private space because there was no space available in a public building. And so hopefully that will happen, and we will be on track to actually occupy the space before the end of the fiscal year as well. The next item related to various things, and I want to be brief, recognize the time, but also be responsive, so I'm going to kind of run through this quickly. So on the annual report, as Ms. Hyde mentioned, it has been submitted. The challenge with the annual report is the timeline of the deadline in November and including legislative recommendations. That has been very challenging, and so we would ask that if we could separate that out, or we'd also be open to an earlier deadline for the annual report, and then a separate letter, whatever we want to do for legislative recommendations. So on the annual report, we have the 2024 comprehensive plan was updated in August, and it is posted on the website. Prior to the posting of what I call the pretty version, the published version, we have published all the changes that were recommended that the board adopted. So there were no substantive changes between what was posted and the final version that has now been posted as soon as it was available. We do, as Ms. Hyde noted, have a teacher preparation work group that was reconvened this fall and will be meeting in 2025. We are doing this jointly with both MSDE and higher education, as well as LEAs, to try to bring all of the different folks together who are involved in both preparing teachers and recruiting and retaining teachers to work on strategies to improve some of the very things that you were asking questions about around retention, recruitment and retention of teachers of color, building out those pathways for conditional teachers to be able to become fully licensed, because as Dr. Wright noted, it's a powerful grow your own initiative, and it's also a very diverse group. Regarding technical assistance, again, thank you for the additional funds you provided for that. We have provided grants to all 24 LEAs, and the CTE committee have received grants this year in various focus areas. The majority of the grants, 1.8 million, have gone to LEAs to support strategic budgeting and resource allocation, and they've been paired with financial experts who are helping them with strategies to allocate resources both for the Power School reporting as well as to meet the minimum school funding requirements. On career count, Ms. Hyde mentioned some of the other things that AIB has been doing. I did just want to let you know that on career counseling, as of last month, all of the LEAs, with their workforce development board partners and community college partners who needed to update their MOUs have submitted them, and they've been approved. Also, as of last month, all 24 LEAs have approved plans. There is one county that is not fully approved yet, and will hopefully be fully approved this month. And then on the state agency plans, we are continuing to review those. The board did approve the Consortium for Coordinated Community Supports Plan. The other three agencies are continuing to provide resubmissions that we are then reviewing, and as soon as they are able to be brought to the board for approval, we will do that. I think that we are on a good track with the State Department of Education, which recently submitted a number of pieces. The Higher Education Commission is going to be resubmitting very soon, and the CTE committee is also on track to, I think, have full approval soon. The Juvenile Services to Education program had a later deadline of October, and is going to, take a little more time before we're going to be able to bring that forward for approval. The School Leadership Academy and the Ms. Hyde asked us to comment on the governor's bill and how it might affect the training program and the cost. In terms of the training program, the main change is that it very explicitly includes not just principals, but assistant principals, instructional leaders and coaches in the building, and other school-based staff, which as AIB and MSD have been talking about the teacher shortage, we also recognize that we have a looming school leadership shortage. And so trying to make sure that this training, which we think is very important and valuable, is not just for principals, but for aspiring principals, and so that we work on that pipeline. And then the component that potentially would cost more is the mentoring component, which is not in the current training program, which would be to sort of match, identify mentors to work specifically with the training cohort, successful principals, assistant principals, et cetera. So that would probably have an additional cost to it. The next item relates to the outcome measures and what we call the aligned metrics that the State Board and AIB worked on together, both in terms of making sure that, because we all had different plans with different measures, and we wanted to align those so that we're all looking for and measuring the same thing, and then setting targets. And so, as Ms. Hyde noted, we've set targets for 9 metrics, and the remaining metrics, there are, I believe, 7 of them. On page 5 of our testimony, we gave you a chart with each of the metrics that remain, the anticipated date when the baseline data will be available, which is really the challenge for setting a target, and then what we anticipate the timeline will be for the boards to take action. So you could see in that chart that there are 4 measures that we anticipate bringing to the board later this spring, summer. The AIB and the State Board of Education meet jointly periodically. I think we're working towards quarterly. So we met last month, and we plan to have a meeting in the spring or early summer. And so hopefully we'll be bringing these measures to the board. And that includes the target for Maryland students meeting the CCR standard by grade 10, teachers participating on the career ladder, the percentage of schools with 1 or more school psychologists or school social workers, and then also the school counselor to student ratio. So those will be the ones that we plan to bring to the board in the spring. And then finally, on the MFR, I'll just keep it short. We will revisit, we will take a look at our goals now that we have several years of data. I think the board will be open to setting more ambitious goals now that we've seen what the LEAs are doing.
Thank you so much, Ms. Heiss, for that overview and your answers to the analyst questions. Are there any questions? Yes, Delegate Grist.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Just a teacher shortage issue. I think probably the most effective way to address that, or the low-hanging fruit, is with turnover. Obviously, if we can keep these teachers in those positions longer, those are fewer positions that you actually have to refill. And so I substitute taught for almost 2 years, actually, in Caroline County, and from kindergarten all the way through high school, and in all the schools. And I talked to a lot of teachers, and I saw it firsthand. The challenges that they face. Certainly in the classroom. The biggest challenge, at least most recently, is the higher number of, and I guess we used to call them ELL students, English language learner. I think it's
multilingual
something different now.
learners.
Yeah, multilingual. Yes, correct. And that's a real challenge, because the last class that I taught in, Calculus 1, Calculus 2 in a high school, and it looked to me, it was more than probably 2/3 of the class. There's a complete language barrier between the teachers and the students. And obviously, throughout this whole process, it's not fair to the students, not fair to the teachers, not fair to the entire system, especially if they're being, accountable to that. And then the second piece too is especially middle school and high school, a lot of these kids just know that they can almost get away with anything with very little accountability. And so these teachers are in a position where if you have an unruly student, I mean, it's tough. It's tough to be able to separate them from the rest of the class and then still stay focused on, teaching the kids who actually want to learn. And so are there any discussions at all to be able to help these teachers in both of those situations? Because I think that's a big reason why many teachers actually leave.
Well, thank you for your analysis of that. And this is something I think detailed in the classroom. And there are discussions about precisely what you've stated. I asked Dr. Wright to come up because that's a more technical.
Okay. Thank you.
MSD.
So you are exactly right. The numbers of students that are multilingual learners are rising in Maryland. And we simply do not have enough multilingual learner teachers. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we provide professional learning to our general ed teachers in order to better meet the needs of our multilingual learners in their classrooms, because 9 times out of 10, it's going to be, just as you said, the general ed classroom teacher that's going to be helping those students. So we're putting together some resources and some professional learning experiences for our teachers who have large numbers of multilingual learners in their classrooms in order to know how best to meet their needs. I also hear what you're saying about student behavior. We've heard that as well. Classroom management is always something that is an issue. We are looking into that as to what we can do to provide some more help to teachers across the state where specific needs are concerned. And so just know that that is on our radar, and we are working on both of those issues as we speak.
Good. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Any other questions? I think that ends our hearing for this particular
Thank you.
section. Appreciate you all. Thank you all taking the time out. Next up, aid to community colleges. And then we're going to have our budget analyst, Ms. Kelly Norton, to start us off.
Thank you. Funding for the community colleges in the state is primarily funded through formulas, with the most prominent being the Senator John A. Cade funding formula. Additional funding is also provided to support retirement payments for community college employees. As shown in the operating budget summary on page 1, the fiscal 2026 budget increases by $23.8 million, or 5% from fiscal 2025 to 2026. Turning to page 5, we can review the successful persistent rates for the community colleges. Persistent rates are the means by which we evaluate whether or not community colleges students are successfully meeting their goals. This includes only students who have attempted at least 18 credits in their first 2 years after enrolling at their college, and then who after 4 years are either still enrolled, have graduated, or have transferred. Those students would then be considered successful persisters. As you can see in Exhibit 1, the rate in Maryland has held fairly level at around 70% for these students, with a 72.4% persistent rate for the 2019 cohort. If you'll turn to Exhibit 2 on page 6, you can see the persistent rates broken down into 3 categories. Those being students who entered as college ready, students who required developmental courses and completed them, as well as students who did not complete required developmental coursework. As you can see, the developmental completers persist at a rate that is just below college ready students, though they don't graduate or transfer at quite the same rate. Meanwhile, developmental non-completers are far less successful at persisting. This emphasizes the importance of students completing developmental coursework. Exhibit 3 on page 7 shows the distribution of the different categories of students in the state. As shown in the exhibit, 27.6% of students are considered non-persisters. The largest portion of this total are the developmental non-completers, which represent 11.1% of the total cohort. Exhibit 4 on page 8 shows how community colleges are performing with their students who require developmental coursework. As shown, Baltimore City Community College had the highest portion of its students require developmental coursework at 95%. Anne Arundel Community College clears its students through developmental coursework at the highest rate, with 89% of its students who need that coursework completing it, while Prince George's Community College has the lowest rate, with 55% of its students completing the required developmental coursework, a significant increase from the 27% from its 2018 cohort. Exhibit 5 on page 9 shows the successful persistent rate by community college as composed of the developmental non-completers, developmental completers, and college ready. This past fall, MHEC released a new developmental education dashboard. Exhibit 6 through 8 covers some of the information available from this dashboard. Exhibit 6 on page 10 shows the proportion of students needing remediation. You can see the proportion of students needing developmental education has continued to decline over the reported period. There was a significant drop with the 2020 cohort. I suspected it was related to a change in enrollment patterns due to the pandemic, but the researchers at MHEC reached out to me to say it was most likely driven by community colleges' efforts to improve assessment and place students more accurately. This cohort coincides with the 2019 Memorandum of Understanding to formally establish a multiple measure standard for assessing college proficiency. Exhibit 7 on page 11 shows the average credit accumulated by full-time first-year students. On average, college-ready students accumulated more credits than their counterparts who need developmental education courses. Exhibit 8 on page 12 shows the retention and graduation rates by remediation status. College-ready students have higher retention and graduation rates. However, both groups have graduation rates below 20%. The Maryland Association of Community College should comment on how community colleges are seeking to raise graduation rates for both college-ready and students requiring developmental education coursework. Moving on to page 13, we have the graduation rate and transfer achievement gap for minority students of the state, which is shown in Exhibit 9. This gap is illustrated in an exhibit with both African American and Hispanic students falling below the all students category. White and Asian students experience increases in the four-year graduation and transfer rates for the 2019 cohort, while African American and Hispanic students graduate rates decreased. Exhibit 10 on page 11, on pages 14 and 15, look at the enrollment at the community colleges. As seen in Exhibit 10 on page 14, total community college enrollment has increased for the second consecutive year. Total enrollment has increased by 4.6% to 107,245 students for fall 2024. Exhibit 11 on page 15 tells a similar story. Fiscal 2024 saw an increase across all FTEs enrollment type. Moving to the budget, the discussion of the fiscal 2026 allowance is summarized on page 16. Exhibit 12 on page 17 shows the distribution of the different categories of funding. As shown, funding for the CADE formula makes up 80.3% of the total funding, while retirement is the next highest portion at 15.1%. Exhibit 13 on page 18 shows the changes in funding from fiscal 2025. The most significant change is found in the CADE funding, which increases by $16.9 million. In total, there is a 5% increase in aid to community college funding when compared to fiscal 2025. Below the Where It Goes chart is a discussion of the BRFA. The BRFA of 2020-25 would permanently decrease the state's contribution to the retirement costs of the community colleges and increase the local share. The reduction is 50% of the year-over-year increase in the employer contribution from fiscal 2025 to 2026. The reduction amount will stay the same in future fiscal years. It will not be adjusted based on future increases. The fiscal 2026 budget includes a $4.8 million general fund reduction contingent on the provision and will reduce the state allowance to the community college's fringe benefits to $75.5 million from $80.3 million at a 6% decrease. Exhibit 14 on page 20 shows how CADE funding has increased with the rise in statutory level funding, growing from $249.7 million to $401.6 million from fiscal 2020 to fiscal 2026. Exhibit 15 on page 21 shows the audited FTEs and grant per FTEs at the community colleges. Due to years of declining enrollment and the phase-up of the statutory funding, grants per FTEs grew significantly. However, with the increased enrollment in the BRFA of 2024, grants per FTEs are expected to decrease in fiscal 2025 and 2026. Moving to the issues, we begin on page 22. The first issue is on the CADE funding formula. Committee narrative in the 2024 JCR requested that DLS, in consultation with MAC, conduct a study on the CADE funding formula. To complete the response, DLS looked at the history of community college funding in the state, conducted a survey of the funding mechanisms across the nation, and identified 6 key considerations for modernizing the community college funding formula. 3 funding models were the most common across the nation: enrollment-based funding, performance or outcomes-based funding, and equity-based funding. Enrollment-based funding is a method that usually allocates funding on a per FTE basis. performance or outcome-based funding allocates funding to community colleges based on achievement of certain student outcome goals, such as graduation rates. And equity-based funding is built around addressing disparities in higher education by allocating additional funding for colleges that serve higher proportions of underserved or underrepresented populations, such as low-income students or racial minorities. DLS did not make any recommendations, but did highlight 6 key considerations. 1, incorporating equity-focused funding. The equity-focused model would align with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future's goals of promoting equity and ensuring institutions serving disadvantaged populations have the necessary resources. Number 2, integrating performance-based metrics. This type of model could be used to incentivize community colleges to improve student success, particularly for low-income and underrepresented students. However, there are downsides. It could hurt schools that serve the most vulnerable populations. Also, institutions may be incentivized to shift focus away from academic standards to meet outcomes to secure funding. Number 3, reintroduce a fixed component component. Doing so could help Maryland's smaller colleges that have higher per-student operational costs, particularly those in rural or underserved areas. Number 4, consider decoupling funding from the public four-year institutions. The current linkage to funding for the state public four-year institutions has provided a predictable and stable funding structure and integration into the broader higher education ecosystem. Decoupling community college funding from four-year institutions could allow for a more tailored approach that better addresses the unique challenges of community colleges, such as fluctuating enrollment, regional economic demands, and the costs associated with workforce training programs. Number 5, consider expanding the definition of eligible FTEs for funding purposes. Currently, certain groups such as adult learners and part-time students are not included in FTE counts. These groups increasingly make up a significant portion of community college students. Broadening the eligible FTEs base could provide a more accurate funding that reflects the true scope of student enrollment and institutional costs. And finally, number 6, build around metrics that are easy to collect, access, and analyze. When designing or modernizing funding formulas, especially those that incorporate equity components, it is essential to choose readily available and verifiable metrics. This method ensures transparency and consistency without creating complex reporting requirements for institutions. The second issue looks at dual enrollment in Maryland. It begins on page 24. Exhibit 16 on page 25 shows the high school grades of duly enrolled students. Most duly enrolled students are in the 12th grade, but there has been growth in 11th graders participating in dual enrollment. Exhibit 17 on page 26 shows the racial and ethnic demographics of duly enrolled students in the overall high school population. White students are overrepresented in the dual enrollment population compared to overall high school population. For example, in the 2022 to 2023 academic year, they accounted for 45.8% of duly enrolled students, but only 33.7% of high school students. Similarly, Hispanic students are underrepresented. They made up 9.9% of duly enrolled students, but 21.3% of all high school students. Between the 2017 to 2018 academic year and 2022 to 2023 academic year, approximately 72% of duly enrolled students who enrolled in college opted to enroll at Maryland higher education institutions following high school graduation. Exhibit 18 on page 27 shows students' favorite community colleges from fall 2018 to 2020, but that trend reversed in fall 2021, with more students choosing a Maryland four-year institution. Dual enrollment has the potential to help students save on future college courses. However, Exhibit 19 on page 28 shows that throughout the course of their high school academic years, most duly enrolled students only attempt between half and one full credit during their time in high school. The third issue begins on page 28 and focuses on tuition fees and student aid for community colleges. Exhibit 20 on page 29 illustrates that tuition and fees at Maryland community colleges has been growing. In 2024, the average tuition and fee level for Maryland Community College was $5,002, which is $562 greater than the national average. If you turn to the next page, you can see the tuition and fee rates by community colleges. In Exhibit 21, the dotted line is the maximum federal Pell Grant amount that students can receive. You can see based on where that line is in the graph, how much that line would cover. And county tuition for all of the state community colleges, state community colleges would be met, but only at Baltimore City Community College and Hagerstown would out-of-county tuition be met. Montgomery College and Garrett Community Colleges in particular have very high out-of-county tuition rates. In fact, their rate is more along the lines of public four-year institutions in the state. Exhibit 2022 on page 31 shows institutional aid and Pell Grant aid provided. Pell Grant is significantly higher than institutional aid, with $120.5 million being provided in fiscal 2024. This data is self-reported by the community colleges to the Maryland Association of Community Colleges and DLS. The increase in Pell Grants for fiscal 2024 coincides with the increased enrollment. If you will turn to page 32, Exhibit 23 shows the institutional awards by institution. Allegheny College provides the greatest institutional aid awards per 100 FTEs to its students at 87 per 100 FTEs. The college is also giving the largest average amount per student, with institutional aid award reaching $1,981. The DLS recommended action is found on page 33, and that is to concur with the governor's allowance. And with that, I conclude my presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Norton, for your analysis. Are there any questions for her today? Seeing none, we'll move on to the panel. We'll welcome Brad Phillips, Dr. Sandra Kurtnitis, and then Dr. Yolanda Wilson. Y'all can come up. And I do see some other friendly faces and community college leaders here, so feel free to also introduce them for the benefit of the group.
Well, thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the subcommittee. My name is Brad Phillips, Executive Director for the Maryland Association of Community Colleges, and I do want to give a mention that we have Dr. Felicia Williams, the President of Prince George's Community Colleges, with us as well today. We had a number of other presidents that wanted to be here, but due to the weather, they opted not to, but they were planning to be here. First of all, thank you for that excellent analysis of our aid to community colleges. We also want to thank DBM and the administration for funding the formula for the CADE formula for this current year, considering the reductions that were made last year. We're grateful for the funding, considering the constraints, that we're maintaining the level of funding with our growing enrollment. But we do have a couple of issues we want to discuss. And with me today is Dr. Kurtnitis and Dr. Wilson, who are going to speak a little bit more about that. But one of it has to do with the changes that were made in the calculation on how to form the CADE funding around FTEs and the removal of the hold harmless. Some of the changes arbitrarily impacted the way in which our FTEs are calculated, which makes it look as though we have a reduction in students when in fact we're increasing. So for that one particular college, College of Southern Maryland, they've grown over 4%, but they're getting cut over less than 4% decline in the revenue from the prior year. And the same is true for the Community College of Baltimore County. So we're hoping that we can get some type of resolution, a reinstatement of the hold harmless to protect it. We do not think that the mandate, if it's funded accordingly, should be so inequitable across the board for our colleges. You have the ability to change that at any given moment when the budget requires your action, but when it's running smoothly, it doesn't seem fair. As you know, you cannot have economic development without the role of community colleges in your state. Our colleges play such a vital part of our economic growth and have an annual economic impact of about $11 billion every year. And I'll be the first person to say that I think that's an underrepresentation of what our full potential could really be. We've talked a little bit about our enrollment in credit programs. We have more students in non-credit licensures, certifications, leading to workforce development opportunities in our state. And those jobs are necessary for our economy to grow. They provide opportunities for people who are underrepresented and underutilizing the resources that they have to be able to get a good paying job and bridge that skills gap that our state has. So we are a vital part of your economic development and growth plan in the state of Maryland. You've asked me to talk about two questions, and I'll do so quickly before I hand it over to my co-panelists. But you asked us to talk about ways in which we're raising graduation rates. And we work with this all of the time. We wrote a JCR on it as well. It's good to know that the analyst brought up the fact that some of the changes that we've made are beginning to be reflected in our degree progress analysis, multiple math pathways, placing more students into college level work instead of developmental. One of the biggest things that you've seen nationally is the adaptation of co-requisite models where we have developmental courses attached to our credit-bearing courses. And that that was pioneered actually in Maryland, has spread nationally. So it's a big success story. We also have done curriculum redesign. We've redesigned our developmental courses to get students through quicker. We've embedded tutors and more support services when the funding is available to do so. We've been able to use data-driven decision-making to make certain we're using student data effectively to address the supports that they need. And we're trying to collaborate more with our high schools and workforce development programs and organizations like Achieving the Dream to align our expectations and share best practices. We're also trying to work on faculty development as well. And rebranding holistic support for our students when they come to our doors and need our support. But these strategies, I think, are going to make more of a difference as the degree progress analysis gets more, because it's a 4-year look back. And the other question that we were asked was about how Hagerstown Community College has used their funding that they received and how has it been expended. And they received a $125,000 grant from the state to conduct a feasibility study for the Washington County Athletic Recreation Community Center. It was a study that was designed to look at the feasibility of their athletic fields and within their whole community, not just the college. So they were assessing how they can grow as a community and addressing their needs. And the money has been fully received and spent, and the study is finished. So with that, I'll pause and hand it over to Dr. Kurtenitis.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandra Kurtenitis, the proud president of CCBC. And before I say one more word, let me extend a huge thank you to all of you for the incredible level of support for our sector last year. We are fully aware of the $2 billion budget challenge that you face, and yet we are still hopeful that you will again support our budget and restore the hold harmless clause. To merit that support, our colleges offer a strong economic return on investment because everything we do is workforce development. Our reach is huge, our impact extensive, and since the 1950s and 60s, we have educated hundreds of thousands of accountants, nurses, welders, plumbers, poets, dancers, you name it, we do it. And 93% of these graduates remain to live and work right in their communities. They get jobs, they buy homes, pay taxes, send their children to the local schools, and 85% of them come from economically challenged communities across Maryland. And that makes us, we think, Maryland's strongest higher education partner in contributing to the state's equity agenda. Recently, a group called Opportunity America dubbed the American Community College the indispensable institution. And to borrow a phrase from T.S. Eliot, we are the practical cats of higher education, often working miracles with 2 hands and 1 leg tied behind our backs. Last year, we educated nearly 300,000 Marylanders, awarded 30,000 degrees and credentials, and transferred 9,100 graduates to the university system. We are, indeed, the indispensable institutions of Maryland, as well as democracy's colleges, and in exchange for the role we happily play in advancing our state's economic and equity agendas, we ask your support for the governor's budget and the restoration of the hold harmless clause. Thank you.
I want to get up and cheer after that. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of this committee. I'm honored and privileged to be with you today. Yolanda Wilson, the College of Southern Maryland. We are deeply, deeply honored at the commitment of Maryland's community colleges and recognition of the value of our institutions that bring almost 500,000 of our students that our colleges are so proud to serve. This demonstrates, through the governor's following of the CADE funding formula, the commitment that this state has through that proposed 4.4% increase to fund us in fiscal year 26, and we are grateful. With this support and the aid to community colleges, however, we ask that you reconsider the change made to the CADE funding formula in the fiscal year 25 calculation and the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act that removed that hold harmless provision that we spoke of just a while ago. This provision assured that community colleges would receive level funding even in years when budgets are challenging, and we recognize that the budgets are challenging, yet for many of us, our enrollment has increased. Due to this change, there are 2 colleges specifically that have been impacted with fewer funds proposed for the year, and that is Community College of Baltimore County, that will receive $117,420 less, and the College of Southern Maryland will receive $851,287 less despite our increasing enrollment. Geez. So furthermore, the impact on the College of Southern Maryland over the last 2 years is a loss of more than $1.6 million in state funding. So when you couple this decrease with the fiscal year 25 reduction of $787,046, it rebased, of course, our CADE formula to 27.2% last year, and the compilation of both of those things has hit us harder than we can imagine. Granted, we had almost 10 years of enrollment declines, we'll admit that, but CSM since January of 2023 has seen light at the end of that tunnel. We have been on the rise, and we are grateful for that. In fact, we've seen an average of 4.5% increase over the past 2 years, and even in this semester, over 10% increase, in large part to our dual enrollment and early college growth. Every semester, we've seen more FTEs. Every semester, we see more needs. Every semester, we want to do more, but we hope that we don't have to do more with so much less. As president of the College of Southern Maryland, I just respectfully ask that the hold harmless provision be restored to the CADE funding formula for Maryland's community colleges. It's not just about CCBC and CSM. It could be any of our community colleges. And as President Kurtenitis said so beautifully, we are the economic engines of the state. And we don't want to be crippled in doing the great work that we love to do and are passionate about doing for most vulnerable student populations that need us the most. So we ask for your thoughtful consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thank you so much for all the collective testimony for our community college leaders. This is just a portion of the tremendous cohort and cadre of leaders we have across the state. But I think I speak for not only myself, but all of us. We're so fortunate to have such passionate and dedicated leadership at our community colleges from the top of the state to the bottom of the state. So thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Yes, Vice Chair.
Appreciate it, Madam Chair. Thank y'all so much for being here with us. And I had multiple conversations with Brad and our good president for College of Southern Maryland, and we appreciate the hard work. We understand the importance of community colleges. I talk about it all the time, how I believe certification, the certification process and folks getting certification, how vital that is for folks to get into the workforce immediately. And so I just want to make sure that folks understand the importance of trying our best to, get CSM and the college in Baltimore County as well to a level where they could continue to move forward, because enrollment did go up, right? And so we wanted to ensure that, we are rewarding and not hurting our colleges. And, I live down in the area of College of Southern Maryland, and that college is vital to that area. So we need to do what we can to ensure that takes place. So, so my question to you, Dr. Wilson, is that what does that affect overall for you down there by taking this? If you combine the 2 years, that'd be $1.7 million. How does that affect you overall?
Thank you for the question, Delegate Harrison. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. You've been a wonderful friend to the College of Southern Maryland. We have students who are incredibly vulnerable, okay? About 50% of our students are Black and brown students. We have expanded food pantry needs, transportation needs, childcare needs. We have students who need help with their textbooks, last dollar scholarships. We have students who need support with academic services like tutoring and math resources. We have students who just need a place, a safe place to be able to take the courses, get workforce credentials, and we don't have workforce Pell. So we're always thinking of ways that we can even support those students who want to do basic law enforcement training, welding, plumbing, HVAC, electrical, all of the things that aren't funding through Pell and loans that we have to help our students with those resources. And so we would utilize those funds to help all things student services first, and then help with faculty development. We want to always increase our retention rates. We always want to make sure that our faculty are sharpening their saw, have the most student-ready and student-centered approaches, the best tools in their toolbox to be able to effectively deliver content. So faculty development would also be impacted by this. And then, of course, we always have things that we have to do as far as upkeep with IT and equipment and things like that that are in our infrastructure that are very vital to our students. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just picking with you, Vice Chair. Any additional questions for our panel? Seeing none, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
We do have a few others that have signed up to give oral testimony. Is Jeffrey Newman here from MHAC? Or Secretary Wright still here? I couldn't see. Okay. I saw that Derek Coley also signed up. Was that on your behalf? Yes. Okay, perfect. And I think there's room for, is Austin Kingston here from AFT? Yes. And then, is Mitchell? Yes. Oh, there you are. Yeah, Mitchell. Is it Tropin or Tropin? Yeah, just go ahead and get comfortable. Secretary Rye.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Harris, and committee members. I am Dr. Sanjay Rai, Secretary for Maryland Higher Education. It is an honor to be here today to discuss one of Maryland's greatest investments, our students, our workforce, and our community colleges. I would like to thank Ms. Kelly Newton again for her thorough analysis, and for this full disclosure, Madam Chair, I'd like to say that I am a first-generation high school graduate in my family, and I came to this great country as a student to doctorate in mathematics. And after my mathematics work, I started a typical career. I became a faculty at a university, and similar promotion, tenure, those kind of things, department head. And I was teaching a couple of graduate classes. And some of my students in that classes two of them were already teaching at a community college, mathematics, full disclosure, calculus, of course. And then some of them were going to become community college faculty. Growing up in India, I had no idea, because community colleges are unique to American higher education system. And when my student told me that these are open access institutions, I said, what does it mean to be open access institution? And she said that nobody is denied admission. Everybody is accepted. And the whole idea coming from a place where getting into college is so incredibly hard, at least in those days, I fell in love with those institutions. Mm-hmm. And I left a modestly successful career in another segment.
Sorry, we do have time here, but I'll give you a little grace.
Thank you. And I came to a community college here in the state of Maryland, and I saw firsthand the role of community colleges for students and for the community. So again, as you finalize our state budget, I am here to reaffirm our commitment to ensuring that every Marylander has access to affordable, high-quality education, and that commitment is evident in our strong support to Maryland's community colleges. Some highlights: this year's budget reflects Moore-Miller administration's belief that no Marylander should be denied the chance to achieve their full potential due to financial barriers. Maryland local community colleges will receive over $504 million in the state support for their operation. Funding for community colleges rose between the last year and this year by 4.39%. Governor has also continued to provide $15 million to the community colleges Promises Scholarship, and these Promises Scholarships are again being extended to part-time students and also to students in non-credit program. Community colleges are also receiving $4.8 million in state funds for cyber ranges that are very important experiential learning opportunities for hundreds of students who are in cybersecurity program across 16 community colleges in our state. Moore-Miller administration is also continues strong investment in capital projects at community colleges, totaling to almost $63.2 million. I will say in the end that as we move forward, we continue to work with educators, students, and employers to ensure that our community colleges remain pillars of opportunities and engines of economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next.
Yes, Jeff Newman, Assistant Secretary for Finance and Administration at MHEC, and I'm just here to say that we concur with the recommended action.
You did that very well.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Good afternoon, Chair Smith and members of the House Education and Economic Development Subcommittee. My name is Austin Kingston, and I'm an organizer with the United Academics of Maryland and the American Federation of Teachers, Maryland State Fed, the certified union for the full-time faculty at 8 community colleges in the state. I'm here today in support of the proposed budget item detailing state aid to our community college, but I also want to draw the subcommittee's attention to a number of issues and concerns that do revolve around our budget at the colleges where we work. You have our written testimony, but let me just highlight a few items in particular. First, I want to say we stand in solidarity with our sibling unions in thanking the Moore administration for generously funding our state's community colleges, many of whom will see a substantial increase in state funds over last year when funds through CAID were cut across the board. We call on the legislature to concur with the governor's proposed budget on this element. We also hope that the legislature will reinsert the hold harmless provision of the CAID formula, which was meant to stabilize and secure state aid to our colleges when there are large declines in student enrollment. Removing that provision last year has meant that this year, some schools will see a cut in CAID funding despite an actual increase in student enrollment. I also want to address the concerns we have about the use of state funds at the colleges. At many community colleges where new unions have recently been certified, the administration has hired outside law firms to handle negotiations, despite the fact that many of these colleges have bargained union contracts with other employee unions for decades. These colleges can and should save taxpayer dollars by having the experienced staff they already have engage in bargaining. Another financial concern surrounds a recent action taken by a community college that fired and privatized its entire HR department, entering into a contract with Florida-based Campus Works, a higher education consulting firm. This contract with Campus Works will cost the college over $7 million in public funds over the next 5 years, which is money that surely can be spent on better classroom instruction or other programming that can improve the quality of our colleges. To date, the college has not stated how many Maryland residents are being laid off and how many Maryland jobs it plans to outsource to this Florida firm. We hope that the subcommittee will ask important questions about the plan to outsource these jobs, legal, administrative, and operational, out of state to private companies. It's now more important than ever that we ask the leadership of our institutions to be held accountable and responsible with our residents' tax dollars. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we're okay. Good afternoon, Chairman, members. My name is Mitchell Tropin. I am the Vice President for Higher Education at SEIU Local 500. I've also taught at community colleges for 22 years, most recently at Montgomery College. Much of what I was going to say has already been said eloquently by others. There's been much talk about the hold harmless. I want to put a human face on it. Last year, when the governor proposed large cuts, several community colleges said they were thinking of or actually went through cutting dual enrollment. I believe Anne Arundel left and other smaller ones. For no other reason, we need hold harmless to protect dual enrollment programs. The gentleman spoke of students who didn't want to learn. Well, I've taught at dual enrollment classes for several years at MC. These are kids who are bright, they're gifted, and they want to learn. More importantly, they're our future. Colleges don't seem to do well with uncertainty, and who can blame them? The cost of dual enrollment is relatively high to other programs. I know there are a lot of complaints that the colleges don't get fully compensated from the high schools, but I can think of nothing more important for Maryland's future than have our students, who are our brightest, get all the tools and skills. And working with those kids, I've seen them go on to our state universities. I've seen them thrive, get great scholarships. And to make it personal, my granddaughter is at Montgomery Blair's in Silver Spring right now. She is excited about taking classes at Montgomery College's Tacoma Park campus when she becomes a senior next fall. That experience is being duplicated in thousands and thousands of homes. But why put it in any danger? Give us the hold harmless, give us full funding. The rewards, the dividends that we'll pay will offset any budget concerns anyone may have. Thank you very much.
I don't think you took the opportunity to say your granddaughter's name if you feel comfortable, since it's on YouTube and it might make you look cool. I don't know.
Jasleen Palacio.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for the panel? Yes, Delegate Grace.
I do. I have one sorry, I forgot your name. No, one right next to you. Yeah.
Austin Kingston.
Austin. Okay, Austin, yep. Now, I remember a couple years ago, it was a big floor debate, and it had to do with the Eastern Shore Education Consortium, where they hired a private company to do their blended virtual system. And it was a very robust debate. Because it was a situation where the students, the teachers, the parents, the administrators, everybody involved in the system absolutely loved it. And not too often do you ever find that situation where everyone will agree to anything for that matter, but in this particular case, they absolutely did. And the union at the time, they didn't like it. And then, you know, I guess the emphasis of the debate was who knows more? You know, is it the system that knows more, the parents, the teachers? So personally, I thought it was arrogant that the unions would come in and say they know more than the parents and the teachers and the administrators and everybody involved locally in that whole process. And so I guess my question for you in regards to that one school, and I think it's a similar situation, where they have a fiduciary duty to manage their budget, and they're more tied locally to the students. They're more tied locally to the parents and the people who are actually paying for these things. I mean, do you feel like the union knows more than they do about what's in their best interests?
By no means am I saying that the union knows more than stakeholders involved. I just wanted to highlight that this is an expensive contract that has been outsourced to a company that is not based in this state at the cost of laying off Maryland workers.
Okay. But that's a risk that they had decided that they're willing to take, and I'm sure that they had considered, everything else. So I just wanted to make sure you could clarify your position on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Delegate Grace. Are there any additional questions for this panel? Seeing none, thank you so much. Christopher Cano, were you planning to come up as well, sir? Okay, absolutely. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you.
You too, Madam Chair. So I'll be brief. I know it's been dragging on, but
that's your specialty, and we appreciate it.
We have so many qualified folks that know so much more, and they say it more eloquently. But the fact is that full funding of the CADE formula is most important to us, to our members. Into the question that you just asked previously, sir, we want to work together. Labor and our partners in the administration want to work together to make sure our community colleges function, because everything works best for everybody and the students have the best outcomes when the folks who are doing the job and teaching work together with the folks who are making the administrative decisions. And we need the full funding of the CADE formula to make that happen, but also the reinstatement of the hold harmless provision. I have to restate that is so vital. Otherwise, in subsequent years, as these budget fights draw on here in the General Assembly, we could see a cascade of budget cuts to our community colleges without the hold harmless provision. It's going to wind up in the long term hurting the economic development and the workforce development that our community colleges are a hub of in the various communities from the Western Maryland mountains all the way to Ocean City on the Eastern Shore. So again, we would just ask that the reinstatement of the hold harmless provision happen, fully funding of the CADE formula. And again, I think it is important that we look at how dollars are spent, and that when there are room for accountability, that folks are called to task for that, because because Maryland jobs matter and the Maryland economy matters. So again, being from Florida myself, you've all heard it many times, I can tell you that sometimes they do not get it right down there, and I have full faith that you all can get it right down here in Maryland.
We love our brothers and sisters in Florida. We're just doing our best here in Maryland. I do want to make sure I did not skip anyone. Brad, was Kevin Justice unable to make it? Oh, Kevin, you're here. Okay. I apologize for missing you earlier. Kevin Justice with Warwick Community College Faculty Association. Great to see you.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name's Kevin Justice. I'm an assistant professor at Warwick Community College on the Eastern Shore. I'm here to address a critical issue affecting our state's economic future: unprecedented shortages in essential skilled labor, particularly in cybersecurity, healthcare, and electromechanical fields that support our manufacturing facilities. Our community colleges are uniquely positioned to solve this crisis, but they need our support. We provide practical, career-focused education and are the most efficient pipeline for creating job-ready professionals in high-demand fields. Consider this: with over 540,000 unfilled cybersecurity positions nationwide and 30,000 in Maryland alone, businesses face billions in losses from security breaches. Our healthcare system struggles with staffing shortages, and our manufacturing facilities are losing maintenance technicians to retirement. Community colleges can bridge these gaps through focused, industry-aligned programs that prepare students in 2 years or less, but we need adequate funding to provide to attract qualified instructors, to expand program capacity, to update technology, and provide student support services. The return on investment is clear. Every dollar invested in community colleges returns approximately $3 to our state economy. More importantly, we create pathways to middle-class jobs while meeting critical workforce needs. This isn't just about education funding, it's an economic security imperative, and I urge you to support increasing the funding to our community colleges. The cost of inaction, a widening skills gap, and continued workforce shortages far exceeds the investment being proposed today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony today, and I apologize for not seeing you earlier, so thank you for being here. Any questions for Mr. Justice? Well, thank you so much for your time, and I just want to just double check to see if Karen Smith-Hupp is here. Or you're good. I thought you did it for her. I didn't. The last one. So that actually concludes all testimony for community colleges and concludes all budget hearings for today.